Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you.
This is it. This is the finale of our first season, our Greco-Roman Odyssey, if you will.
Yes.
An Odyssey that has taken us 10 months since we released our first episode back in January, as we're recording this now.
Right.
And that is contrasted with the 10 years it took Odysseus to complete the Odyssey.
Right.
Right. So are we 12 times better than Odysseus? Who's to say? Hard to say.
You can't beat the speed, though, by
we
comparison. Yeah.
Points in both directions. The one point in our favor is that we have not yet lost any crew members.
So far, yes. And we're in the home stretch, but
we're
never
in the
say
home
never.
stretch.
That's true. And
right.
And we still have the golden goat to give out at the end of this segment. He's doing great so far, but
well,
hopefully he makes it to the finish line.
Right. That's true. But in any case, we're here with our two finalists and our three new deciding categories that we've teased so much. Some people may doubt that we even knew ourselves what we were doing. But we did.
A reasonable doubt there, but we did. There
was a plan. Yeah. So I know you have some things to add before we kick it off.
I do. So, technically this is episode 14, finale part 2. Although I have to mention in part 1, Andrew, you proposed some pretty good nicknames for this one, I think, and I jotted them down. You had the Otherworldly World Cup.
Yep.
The Supreme Being Super Bowl, and the Olympians Olympics, which I thought all pretty strong options for a nickname. Although on further review, each one does contain a host of potential trademark issues that I fear would severely strain our God versus God legal budget. But very excited to be in this winner-take-all matchup. I am about to spoil the two contestants. So if you haven't made it this far, now's your chance to pause. I'll wait about 2 seconds. But yes, now we know it is Apollo, the god of prophecy, against Prometheus, the god of forethought. Now, special occasion for both of us, as you said. The listeners can't tell, but both of us are wearing tuxedos tonight to celebrate. Originally, in full transparency, we had talked about dressing up as our two contestants tonight, but then realizing they both pretty much exclusively wear loincloths. We thought that might be a little weird, even for an audio audience. That would just be a bit much. So tuxedos it is, and we both look great. Yeah. I wanted to mention one quick thing, Andrew, that I didn't mention during the season, but I think I can now. So my very good friend Mark, a devoted listener to the program, he voiced a concern halfway through the season, and I'll paraphrase, but essentially he said, those 5 categories that you guys use in these episodes, all fine and good for an entertaining podcast. But do they really help to determine which god is really best suited to fulfill the ultimate mission of coming back, saving the world from our troubled times? I thought about that, and I do think the categories, if nothing else, provided a thorough audition for all 24 contestants. I would argue both fighting skills and character, both still pretty important to the success of the ultimate mission. Each god's it factor, legacy, maybe a little less relevant, but I think still indicative of their lasting power, maybe a sign of what their performance could be. Whether they would make a good movie or not, that's debatable. It's admittedly maybe not relevant at all, but a lot of fun to close each episode. So I don't regret a thing. So stakes are as high as they've ever been. These 3 categories, I think, will give us a more direct hit as far as who's really going to potentially do this job better. And, both of these contestants have done extraordinarily well to get this far, but it's time for a final decision. So we're going to compare and contrast them. We're going to go into those 3 categories, really figure out who is going to be set up for success in the mission. And as we were talking about before we got on, the timing couldn't be better. I am headed off to Greece just this coming weekend, in large part to deliver the grand prize to the winner. To get the golden goat to whoever emerges as victorious. I'm still hoping that a gold-plated goat will make it through airport security. Debatable, but we're about to find out. So all that said, Andrew, why don't you start us off? We're going to at least talk you, the viewer, the listener, through these 3 categories so you're grounded, and then we'll dive in. So Andrew, why don't you start us with the first one?
Yeah, so, give us the best possible entries for our new interfaith pantheon. This is sort of the ultimate job interview, as I think you said before.
Right.
So the first of our new categories is gods with benefits. And so the simple idea here is that we're going to all this effort. If Matt's going to sacrifice his beloved house goat, And we're going to ask our multitude of listeners to offer up a piece of goat kebab or pour a libation or whatever it is. We need to get some benefit, some little something for the effort,
Right.
And something that's going to help us save this troubled world. So, in this one, really, Gods with Benefits, we're looking for the potential contributions here to save our troubled world. What benefits does this God offer us in the modern day?
Yes.
Right. And so you're going to tell us a little about the second one, right?
Yes. So second category is what we're calling divine comity. Now I'm pronouncing that with a soft T because it's comity with a T, as in getting along, as in playing well with others. So, many of our contestants did a really great job. Were very accomplished at exerting their own sort of godly will upon their world. Much fewer of them have shown the ability to really to coordinate or collaborate in a fruitful way with their fellow gods, with
Right.
mankind, other miscellaneous creatures that show up in mythology. So that said, we agreed that the spirit of collaboration does seem pretty important to that ultimate mission to save the world. They can't do it on their own. They're going to need to be able to get along with others. So that sense of divine comity will be our second order of business in that second category, which will take us to the third category, third and final.
Yeah, all right. So that is in God we trustworthiness. So the benefits category, we're looking for the upside. Comedy, we're looking to get along. And here, we're trying to limit the downside. Some people may say summoning ancient gods out of whatever realm their retirement is without any sort of permit is a bit risky. Yeah. In fact, the whole Ghostbusters franchise is based on that premise that's not a great idea. But it's fine here.
Right.
We have a category to deal with that, and that is, are they reliable or are they temperamental? Are they predictable or mercurial? What is the downside risk? And of course, we're going to try and pick the one with the least downside risk, just to be clear.
Yes. Very good. Yes. Not just gauging, but our preference in that regard with the least. Yes. So we'll go through these three. We will, as usual, each pick our choice in the three. We will tally the results. Hopefully there'll be a winner at the end. If not, we'll have to throw it to the fates. But we'll find out. Right. So we're going to start. So let's dive right in. We're going to start with just by giving you a brief introduction, a little refresher, in case you were not fully refreshed as the listener on who's who. We're going to give you a little intro of that now. So we'll begin with the who ended up finishing with the most points in our first part of the finale. Winner of episode 3, top of the 2 finishers, part 1. That's Apollo. So Andrew, tell us a little bit about Apollo to refresh our memories, if you will.
Sure. The little refresher here. These are the gods who won their initial round, and then they went on in our penultimate episode and defeated the 9 other gods who had made it that far. And in this corner, of course, we have our high scorer in that playoff round, Apollo, the god of prophecy, the god of archery, the god of plague management, the god of music. As a reminder, Apollo is the son of Zeus and Leto. He is also the twin brother to Artemis. And an interesting etymology on his name that I don't know that we discussed before. But I found that one version has that Apollo, the name, is derived from the word apollumi. And that means to destroy, implying that he's the god who destroys the wicked and the overbearing, such as, of course, bragging flute players.
Yes.
but then the other word is Apollon, and that is from the root pello. And I'm sure this is all going to come up when you go to Greece. By the time you get back,
it's all good intro for me. But yes, thank you.
Right, meaning pello, meaning the one who drives away evil, or one who rides a stationary bike. Not clear, but nice. So I think we've seen either of these etymologies could be consistent with at least some of the stories that we've gotten about Apollo. He has a low tolerance for the overbearing, especially when that overbearingness comes from pride or hubris.
Right.
He also drives away plagues and is the protector of youths, especially male youths, as long as they have a suitably humble mother, of course.
Right.
And And Apollo's journey here, again, he faced off way back in episode 3 against his half-brother, one of his many half-brothers, but this one, fellow Olympian Vulcan, to use the Roman version, or Hephaestus. And, of course, Apollo, as I said, won in that round. He won Immortal Combat, Curriculum Vitae, and Iconography, winning 3-2 against a very formidable opponent.
Yep.
But these are, as we said, new categories, and he has an even more formidable opponent who you're going to introduce to us now.
I will. So Prometheus, of course, the god of forethought, he was our winner of episode 5, soundly defeated the Moirae, the Fates, in that episode. And even knowing that the god of forethought is going up against the god of prophecy is an interesting little dichotomy already with him and Apollo, right? You've got, forethought is really about thinking ahead and planning, which is Prometheus. Apollo, but he can tell what can happen because of prophecy. So planning versus knowing, already an interesting little difference, a distinction to chew on. We'll see if it factors in. But unlike Apollo, who, as you mentioned, was an Olympian, son of Zeus, Prometheus, of course, comes from the other side of the family, the Titan part of the lineage, the less glamorous branch of the family tree. That group, of course, is descended from those earlier, more primordial gods, the first representations of the heaven and the earth, the ocean and such, followed by these gigantic kind of rough drafts that we know as the Titans. It's early prototypes, monsters often with 100 heads or a single eye, really more bearing a closer resemblance to serpents and dragons than they would you and me. Right. But we all recall those episodes in episode 5, The Adventures of Prometheus. A few highlights just to refresh your memory. Of course, he was known for switching sides in the Titanomachy, departing from his own family to help Zeus and the Olympians defeat the Titans and bring in rather inglorious end to his own family's reign. Of course, after the war, Zeus gives him the job of creating mankind, and Prometheus immediately outsources the task to his idiot brother, Epimetheus, the god of afterthought, who initially makes a real hash of the job, but Prometheus comes in, finishes the job, and saves the day. And really, after inventing human beings, loves his creation so much, he ends up stealing fire from the heavens, brings it down to mankind, and enables us to thrive. And he's a bit of a trickster god. So we'll recall he tricks Zeus into choosing, in the first animal sacrifice, choosing the less attractive parts of the animal for sacrifice, which of course gets Zeus very upset in being duped in front of so many people at Mecone. So to get his revenge, Zeus, first of all, directs the creation of women, intended as a curse on mankind. Of course, we know it's proven to be anything but. But his revenge on Prometheus, Zeus commissioned, of course, that terrible punishment. Prometheus was captured by the 2 hench gods, Force and Violence. He was bound to a rock and sentenced to have an eagle eat his liver every day for hundreds of years, which, of course, is a long time for that activity or any activity. For a sense of scale, there's a lot of modern day humans who would rather not listen to the eagles for even a mere 6 minutes and 30 seconds, the approximate length of Hotel California. Now, Prometheus only dealt with 1 eagle, but it was far longer. And in real life, even if that 1 eagle was Don Henley, Prometheus still had it worse. So he endured his ordeal, never spills his secrets, and he's ultimately saved by Heracles. His conscience is clean. He keeps his mouth shut. And he's a contradiction, is Prometheus. He's the god of forethought, and yet a lot of bad things ended up happening to him. So not sure how well he did his job there. But Prometheus ends up being a subject of fascination since ancient times over the years, beloved as the creator of mankind and its tireless champion, but also known for being highly intelligent. He, the author, according to many traditions, of the arts and the sciences, and a bringer of technology. So that's the overview of Prometheus. And, Andrew, I'll admit, these 2 finalists were 2 of my favorites throughout the season. Some really fascinating cats. I've grown quite attached to both, but, as we all know from the 1986 fine film Highlander, there can be only one. So it's time to choose.
Or there can be only one from the Greco-Romans.
Well, that's true. At least for the time being, there could be only one for this season. So let's bring it on. Finale part 2. And I'll say it one last time. As always, may the best God win. Because in this case, if not, we're all screwed. So Anna has to.
No pressure.
No pressure. So why don't you get us started with that first category?
All right. So that is, again, gods with benefits. So again, we're looking at the potential contributions of the gods. What's the upside of bringing this deity back? And so I'm very happy that we did adopt our finals criteria. I think it's forced me at least to look at these divine beings a little bit differently.
Right.
And as your friend pointed out, maybe have a little bit more validity to this process. So, and I think, while it's what we hope to get out of these divine beings, we also have to look at their track record of past performance, because that could be a good predictor of future behavior.
It can.
So what I've done for both of these in this round, the way I looked at it, was I went through some of their things that they did back when they were active in the world.
Right.
And then I looked a little bit like how little thought experiment, how might that apply to us today in the modern world? So I'm going to start with Apollo as our high scorer. And so Apollo has a lot of gifts to give. Some I think are very applicable to us today. Some maybe a little bit less so.
Yes.
So the first one, big one, is prophecy. He's all over it with prophecy, of course. But interestingly, when one looks at the accounts that we had about prophecy in the ancient world in the season, as they thought of it, it's not just fortune telling, right? It's also a tool to solve mysteries. It's an advice column. It is medical advice.
Yeah.
It's a lot of different things. So a couple examples. We saw in episode 4 when Alcyone's husband, he dies on his way to visit an oracle of Apollo. And he's going there to figure out what to do about his brother who's just been transformed into a bird.
That's a problem.
So, yes, that's a problem. And, now I don't know where it would go, probably the internet. But, so it's a problem solving. Now, it didn't work out because his ship went down, but it has a lot of applications. So Heracles consults Apollo's oracles a couple of times, and not generally to find out about the future, but in one case, he's looking for what his penance should be after murdering his family.
Yes.
At Hera's instigation, but he goes to Delphi to figure out, all right, what is my penance?
Right.
And there's another case where he murders a prince named Hephaestus. And for some reason, after murdering Hephaestus, he gets sick. And it's not clear if those are connected, but then he goes to the he goes to the oracle looking for medical advice. So again, another application. All these are pretty useful. In episode 2, Psyche's dad goes to Apollo to look for some matchmaking advice.
That's right. With Psyche, his hot but overmatched daughter. Yes.
Yeah, his daughter who was too beautiful.
That's right.
To find a match. So he does get told to leave her as an offering on a mountain to a hideous monster. So not probably what he was looking for. And though we know now that it was a ruse as a favor to Cupid, but
right.
So you get that kind of advice. And then we also had his son Aristaeus, the god of beekeeping, who uses prophecy to solve the case of the hot drought summer on the island of Chios, where he solves that mystery by finding out that it is the revenge of the dog star against the killers of his master back when he was a dog, due to these killers mistaking alcohol poisoning for a regular poisoning.
Right.
So he finds out all that from the oracle. So much more than just reading your palms.
Yeah, very versatile set of services there, I would say.
Exactly. And it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. It's very diverse, but in the modern world, because as you see, it's a lot of overlap with the internet. It's a little bit like a Reddit channel where you have a sacred duty to follow the advice of the most liked answer. So it's got its good and its bad, or like a how-to on a YouTube video that is activated by a libation of wine rather than watching an ad.
Right.
So, but overall, I think it's a good get. Maybe the new Delphi could be on the internet. Maybe it could be on Zoom. Maybe local police departments could use the local Apollonian oracle to help them solve cases.
There you go.
We just have to, work out the admissibility issue.
Yeah.
of the prophecies in a court of law, but we can figure that out.
Right.
We have the medical thing. Now going on to his other things, we have the medical thing, and again that's big. There have been big strides in the last 1,600 years since Apollo went into retirement.
Mm.
But still, our medicine is expensive. Insurance is always a big political issue here in the U.S.
Yes.
And obviously COVID just showed us that we still have a ways to go. We still have much to be humble about
Yes.
in this. So, and I think, we can talk about some of his other relationships to plagues in God We Trust worthiness round, but on solving them, that's definitely an upside.
Yeah.
We've got the founding of cities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe I don't know. Maybe not as big a one, but somebody who lives in Boston, I think improving urban planning is definitely something I could get behind.
Absolutely.
And of course, Apollo invented at least string music,
Yes.
which maybe he shares the rest of music invention with his sister girlfriends,
Yeah.
the Muses.
Yes.
But huge gift to mankind. One of the things that really brings joy to life, and unlike prophecy, which kind of seemed to die out after Apollo
Yeah.
left the scene, music has stayed with us.
That's true.
But he may be able to make more contributions here. Maybe he'll bring back the lyre.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't know what we're missing. Maybe we just haven't heard somebody as practiced as him really make the instrument sing.
Right.
Or if he embraces the guitar, maybe he could bring rock music back into popularity, which is something people keep trying to do.
I'd be all up for that. Yeah.
Yeah, or maybe he'll just invent a whole different type of music. I got one based about smells or scents or something. Who knows? he could do lots of different things. And so, lastly, on him, I'm going to do the punishment of hubris and relatedly his purification of crimes and penance. Hubris is a real problem today. I think a lot of people walking around with an inflated sense of their own abilities. Many of them are online a lot.
Yes.
Run into them all day. Or in the case of, say, Vladimir Putin, they have an inflated sense of their own armed forces capabilities.
Yes.
And can get themselves into a lot of trouble as well as others. So,
quite so.
A few potential downsides on this one as well, but we'll talk about that in later rounds.
Okay.
So that's just Apollo. And on Prometheus, so we have, again, an impressive list of original gifts. Ones I think pose some interesting questions about how to apply those to our current times. First, famously, obviously, we have the gift of fire. He went all the way to the sun to get fire for us.
Right.
Came back, delivered it to mankind. But it's more than a candle light, more than a campfire. It was the start of technology and craftsmanship, and of course, as you let us know, ramen noodles.
Yes.
And these were early days. Men were sort of weaker, hairless cave dwellers.
Right.
So getting that ball rolling was huge. So it would be good to have Prometheus around as sort of a pilot light in case we either literally or simultaneously lose all fire and forget how to make it, or our technology stalls out in case we need another boost. Maybe there's some other elements or compounds on other planets or stars that Prometheus wouldn't mind just going and picking up for us. Maybe grab some new radioactive isotopes that we can do something with.
I hadn't thought of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So he who's to say he's done? So then we have the creation of men out of clay, and he was more or less the one who did it with a little help from his idiot brother.
Right.
Did he do the best job possible? Arguably not. But again, that's something we can talk about in future rounds, but not too bad overall. And even though he delegated out the creation of animals to said idiot brother, I think maybe Prometheus can also probably form animals if he comes back.
Sure.
Maybe bring back some extinct species like the dodo bird or dinosaur, which people seem to think is an interesting idea, even though it doesn't go too well in the movies.
No.
Maybe he could help create some species to deal with the invasive species we already have. So lots of different things he could do there. Then there's the sacrifice thing, which you mentioned in your intro.
Yeah.
Preserve the best cut for mankind. Now, that doesn't come up too much these days, but if we are successful, as I suspect we will be in creating this new pantheon, I still want to keep the good cuts for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it also demonstrates that Prometheus operates so often as an advocate for humanity. You're kind of like a slightly shady lawyer, perhaps,
Right.
sort of a Better Call Prometheus vibe,
Yes.
but
Yes.
he's a good thing. And then the last one I have on him uh, is the preservation of hope. Uh, when all the horrors of Pandora's jar were released in Aeschylus' play, Prometheus admits to the chorus that it was him who saved hope as the only thing left contrary to Zeus's command.
Yes.
So, a lot of different good and bad thing. I think we have two really strong choices.
Yes.
In this round. But I will tell you that overall, looking at all this in the application going forward, I felt like bringing prophecy back was a little better than improving our technology, because I feel like we're on an okay path there. So I went with Apollo as the winner of this round.
Okay. Very good. Well, let me backtrack then to the beginning of the category.
Yep.
Apollo, as you mentioned, some of his skills more applicable than others. And I think you did a great job at outlining some of those that more relevant ones. We do have to mention a few that are probably a little less useful. Since he was the god of herd and flocks, that may be pretty critical in certain shepherding circles, probably less of an immediate factor to the fate of the world, but he's got that in his resume. Also, I feel like I have to mention, since he is the most Greek of the gods, I would assume Apollo would have access to an unlimited supply of gyros, musa, baklava, my favorite saganaki. Again, not terribly helpful in saving the world per se, but it would make the world very tasty. At least for the time that he was around. There are, I think, some of his strengths that were pretty important to him that may be, questionable in our day and age. So, of course, we have his legendary skill in archery. As you mentioned, it was kind of invented by himself and his sister Artemis. He used it to defeat Typhon, the serpent monster who attacked his mother. And of course, that served him well in war and against the Trojans, the Indians, others. I did recall we didn't mention this in the original, but in the Gigantomachy, the war against the giants that sort of happened after the Great Titanomachy, he did register a half kill against the giant named Ephialtes. And it was a half kill because Apollo shot his left eye and Heracles shot his right eye. So it's just a really interesting use of warfare. Now, back then, archery could have taken you very far.
Yeah.
That skill might be a little less useful against, your modern day armies, your bunker busters, your tactical nukes.
Right.
So great at the time, a little bit less so now. Similarly, Apollo, of course, had his great athleticism.
Yep.
Only that, again, can go so far in today's world. Now, in the first Olympics, you'll recall he outran Hermes in the foot race. He defeated Ares in wrestling. Who knows today? I mean, for his luck, when he's quaffing divine ambrosia on the sidelines, that could be declared a performance-enhancing drug, and the Chinese might disqualify him. So hard to say. I think he would still be a great athlete, but not as potent a skill to save our time. That said, some of his maybe minor skills could actually be quite critical. So we'll recall he is the protector of fugitives and refugees. So if trends should continue and, our southern governors keep packing asylum seekers into your planes and buses and sending them to posh locales like Martha's Vineyard or, I don't know, Malibu, Aspen, Quincy, Massachusetts, all the hotbeds, Apollo will be able to pitch in and probably help them out. So that will solve one problem. He is also the giver of laws and establisher of constitutions for new cities and states. You mentioned he was a founder, but also really did get into that legal establishment. So let's just say at some point, if the U.S. Supreme Court at some point begins to defy the will of the people, he may be able to intervene there too. So we've got an important check against the check and the balance. The healing part of it, I think, is the kind of the most obvious crossover appeal with what we've got. And of course, he was big into warding off evil and sickness. That tradition, as you countered in episode 10, led to the first physician, his son Asclepius.
Yep.
And as you alluded to up front, he does have this ability to deliver people from epidemics, which of course could prove really useful for us right now. But as you mentioned, there's a flip side to that. Just as he is willing to heal disease, he is also often willing to bring it. And we'll recall, and I think we'll allude to this a little bit later, but back to the Iliad. In the Trojan War, Apollo got a little bit miffed at the treatment of one of his lieutenants and did, send a plague to the Greeks. Right. And they knew only he could cure it. So they bowed down, offered him a sacrifice of many cows. So yes, on one hand, great healing power, but on the other hand, if you rub him the wrong way, potentially could make a bad situation worse. So we'll get to the risk element in the loose cannon factor in that third category, but suffice to say, a very powerful skill with a large upside and potentially a large downside as well. Prophecy, I think you're right. I think there's something to that. I had forgotten the sort of multidimensional notion of what that oracle did. And yet, if there may be a dark side to the prophecy as well. So if Apollo already knows the ending to coming back and saving the world, how hard is he really going to fight to save us if it's already preordained? Will it matter? I'm afraid this gets into depths of the time-space continuum, having too much knowledge of the future, the paradoxes, the flux capacitors, maybe a little too much hard science for this program. But there's a risk inherent there too, that if he knows too much, he just might not try as hard. But the other side of his prophecy component was that he always spoke the truth. And this was important, as the keeper of the oracle at Delphi, you had to speak the truth because everyone needed to trust your prophecy. Apollo never lied. Now, as you mentioned, he was a little cryptic from time to time. He would give you more of a riddle than a straight answer, but the truth was always in there sometimes. And you can certainly argue that in this time of mistrust, misinformation, disinformation, fuzzy math, weird science, it would be incredibly helpful to have a single undisputed source of truth around. And Apollo, for all of his ups and downs, was certainly that. So he swings a big bat there. So some good and some bad, I think, in terms of applicability to add to what you mentioned. Jumping to Prometheus, as God of forethought, he's always going to be planning ahead, always a strength. So if he is chosen, if he wins, he's not going to arrive unprepared. But he will provide, I think, a pretty rare combination, which is that he's got a great brain, wisdom, and intelligence, but also kindness. And in my experience, you really don't get both of those at the same time very often. You really kind of pick one or the other.
Right.
And as you alluded to, not just the creator, but the champion of humanity, Prometheus, you got to love his dedication to the cause. If he had a fatal flaw, is that he loved human beings so much that he gave his all to protect us. And, beyond that, he's very good at fixing things. So as you mentioned, Epimetheus, the idiot brother, screwed up that original version of mankind. But Prometheus did step up, save the day, and made man stand erect like the gods, gazing forever at the stars. The sense of him standing up to Zeus and he's standing up to the powerful, I think, is an important criteria as well. So when he was able to trick Zeus at Mecone, now, yes, he did pay a great price for it, but he's daring. He's willing to pull some shenanigans on the people who are pulling the strings. And I think that's exactly what we need in a day and age like this. In terms of practical skill for Prometheus, it's hard to say. We don't really have a story of him having any particular superpowers apart from the normal god slate of abilities, right? So of course he can fly to the sun to get the fire. Of course, his liver is able to regenerate itself every day after the eagle eats it out. He is known for bringing, as you said, technology to mankind. I wonder if he is kept up to date. And so I like your idea of him going and fetching radioactive isotopes. My thought was he was great at fire. We've already got that. We're pretty good at it. In fact, in places like California, they have so much fire, it's more than they can use. They have a surplus of fire. So it would really depend on whether that's talent of getting new technology has remained up to date, or whether you could get up to speed over the last couple of millennia pretty quickly. Another red flag maybe for Prometheus is that, because of these mishaps that often happen, despite his good intentions, he ends up becoming known as the god of unintended consequences. Now, and given the unpredictable state of our world, I have to admit this gives me a little bit of pause. And you'll remember Mary Shelley gave her masterpiece Frankenstein the subtitle "The Modern Prometheus."
Yes.
And like the doctor of that work, Prometheus is this lone genius who thinks that he and only he can make things better for humankind. And whenever somebody thinks that, whenever they think I alone can fix it, there tends to be tragedy following after that. So in this case, I think Prometheus would have his heart in the right place. I do wonder, based on the track record, how well he would do in execution. Now, what does make this a puzzling element to the category is that we do have one alternate history. You mentioned Aeschylus, the dramatist. In one telling of it, in Aeschylus's telling of it, Prometheus has already done the job of saving mankind. So in a way, he's already got a sort of a trial run of practice. Now, this goes back to that trilogy that we talked about, from Aeschylus, based on the work, original source material from Hesiod, but you've got Prometheus bound, Prometheus unbound, and then Prometheus the firebringer. In that telling, there is the myth of the 5 ages of man.
Yes.
Of course, in which Zeus creates and destroys humanity 5 successive times. Now, the good news is, what must have been the 5th time in this Aeschylus telling, Prometheus does somehow stop Zeus from destroying mankind completely.
Right.
So does it against the will of Zeus. So he's not great in terms of being an employee. So he's very insubordination is kind of his thing, but he believed in the cause. So you alluded to this earlier, where humans in that final wave of existence may have known the future. Prometheus chose to take that away and instead give humankind hope, which gives us the sort of sense of free will. Everything is not preordained. It's up to us. Right. And in doing that, in Aeschylus' telling, he also taught us not just the way of fire, but all sorts of things to mankind: architecture, astronomy, mathematics, writing, medicine, prophecy. So really did give, similar to what the other traditional telling of Apollo, doing that additional work or the excellent work in education.
Yes.
In Aeschylus' telling, and maybe he's taking some dramatic license for his hero, but Prometheus really does teach humankind all this important stuff at the beginning. So whether or not Aeschylus was, ginning up a little bit of extra drama for his lead character, hard to say. But It was part of the record of the time. It was the popular work of art of the time. And sadly, because that the last work of the trilogy is lost to history, we do not know exactly how Prometheus ended up doing that. Yeah. But we're still here. So one assumes that 5th wave of humanity was saved. And so we've got to give him a little credit for having done this before in that one telling of history and saving us destruction. On the job experience. So in the final analysis between these two, there's a lot of good on both sides and then a little bit of red flags on both sides. But, there's certain things that are equal. I think they're both gods after all. And even technological advancements aside, they're going to find a way to use their powers to be able to figure something out. If character does matter in this question, I think Prometheus gets the nod here. Humans are always his motivation. They're always where his heart is. And if you think about it, Apollo could very well, based on his history, could kind of rest on his laurels. He was great at everything. He always succeeded. I could see him losing interest in the mere doings of man. Even coming back to try to save us, he could get bored. He could kind of take his bow and arrow and go home. and it may be because at this point, Apollo has nothing to prove. He's kind of done it all. So he doesn't really need that sense of one more accomplishment in his, one more arrow in his quiver, if you will.
Okay.
Conversely, Prometheus wants it more. He wants to see, he may want to seek redemption. He may want to clear his name after centuries of imprisonment and want to sort of put that last feather on his legacy. On top of all that, I also recall that Prometheus was never really worshipped at all in the way that Apollo was.
Very little, yeah.
So he really may have this extra motivation of being hungry for new fans. So not only does Apollo perhaps not care as much because he was worshipped all over the place during the ancient years.
Right.
There's an extra dimension to Prometheus saying, I never really got my fan club. Never really got the credit for the worship that all of my compatriots. Right. So because of that, coming down to motivation and not what's behind the skill, who wants it more, I will choose Prometheus.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that is fascinating. So we are split already.
Great. So, we knew it would be a nail biter.
Yes. We are split already. So it is going to come down to the wire, I believe. So then we will go to our second category, which is divine comedy.
Yes.
With that soft T, again, the ability to work in a team, to get along with others. Always a question mark with these Greco-Roman deities.
Right.
And so, Matt, as is traditional, why don't you go ahead on the evens?
So divine comedy, does Apollo play well with others? Well, that kind of depends who you are. If you cross his family, he doesn't play well with you at all.
No.
Of course, he kills multiple monsters in defense of his mother, Leto. Hard to forget the story of Niobe, the queen of Thebes, who insulted Leto's children, Apollo and Artemis. One for being too feminine, one for being too mannish, and not the one you wanted for each one. So, of course, Leto ordered her kids, Apollo and Artemis, to kill all 14 of the queen's children.
Yes.
With Apollo taking the boys, Artemis the girls. Only following orders, but certainly not an example of playing well with others when it comes down to how people treat your family. As you alluded to as well earlier, Andrew, he does not play well with those who commit musical hubris.
Right.
Of course, his life is full of great musical competitions. He defeated the god Pan, god of the wild, in one of those musical contests, and in punishment turned Pan's ears into those of a donkey, which aesthetically really must have messed up the whole half man, half goat look he already had
Yeah.
going. Just way too much.
Bringing a whole new animal in.
Whole new animal, and it just throws the balance. And then, of course, we'll never forget the satyr Marsyas, who unwisely challenged Apollo to a music competition, complained about the fairness of the judging, and ultimately, since the winner of that contest could do whatever he wanted with the loser, was flayed and hung in a tree as punishment by Apollo. So, all instances of Apollo maybe not being as copacetic with others as one might hope. Now, if you don't fight for an opposing army or mess with his mom or insult his musical chops, you might get along with Apollo just fine. And let's remember, at the macro level, of course, he, at least according to most tellings of this history, invented education. He was great about mentoring the youth into adulthood, helped cities get founded, all things which require a great deal of bringing people together. And he, as you detailed quite eloquently, he was sought after and adored by people through his oracle all over the world because the oracle was so multidimensional and useful, had a legendary customer experience. And so you can't run a business like that without getting along with your customers. So he found a way there, whether it was through management or just good oversight. And of course, on a one-on-one level, on an individual basis, Apollo got along great with a lot of lovers, male, female, nymphs, you name it. So, we enjoy using the term mixed bag on this program, but I think, depending how you look at it, he didn't get along with folks who stepped on his toes. In fact, was quite violent toward them. But when it comes to the sort of the collective nature of his work in the world, when it comes to his individual relationships, actually comes away looking pretty good in terms of getting along with others. Moving to Prometheus, I think we've certainly got a smaller sample size of stories about him compared to Apollo, but mostly he does get along very, very well with others. He's of course legendarily kind to his idiot brother Epimetheus. He gives, of course, us humans, his creation, anything he can, and devoted really a great deal of life to making our lives better. On the flip side of that, he is still, he's a trickster god, and he does have, we talked about the shenanigans with Zeus at Mecone. You can forgive some of those shenanigans because in today's parlance, he is punching up. He's sticking it to the man, and because as humans, we're left with the benefits of that. We get the better parts of the animal. We get the women, the barbecues, just to name a few. So I think Prometheus scores pretty well, and when he is being a little trickstery, it's with the right heart in mind. So it almost comes down to a tie because there's a sort of equal mixed bag on both. Both fare pretty well, but there's a really intriguing aspect to this category that for me breaks the tie, and that is that we do have an instance of our two contestants interacting with each other. So this is not the universal telling of the story, but in some accounts of the story, Apollo himself actually sticks up for Prometheus and lobbies to get him released. So he goes to Zeus a couple hundred years into the punishment. Not only does it and makes an emotional plea to Zeus to let Prometheus go, he does it with really good staging. He's got his mother Leto behind him on one side. He's got his sister Artemis on the other. They're both in tears. Zeus is so moved by this display that he finally relents and dispatches Heracles to go and set Prometheus free. So perhaps the ultimate expression of this is these two beings interacting with each other. And in that equation, if all things are equal, Apollo, for me, gets the nod because he made that move when he didn't have to. To stick up for Prometheus and to get him released from that terrible punishment. So I choose for the second category, for Divine Comedy, by a very slim margin, I choose Apollo.
All right, that's very interesting. And I'm glad that you were the one who went first on this one because this was the one that I am the closest on. But I'll go through my thinking on it. And it's similar to yours, but I think I gave, because I was thinking of like, how are they going to get along with their other Pantheon members working in a team with them more than working with humans. So I kind of weighted it a little bit more towards their divine interactions. So, strong points for both. For Apollo, I think there are a couple of things to highlight. You mentioned he gets along great with his family, his mother and his father, which is not always the case.
Right.
slightly more complicated relationship with his sister. For the most part, they got along well, his twin sister.
Hmm.
But there was, of course, the incident where Apollo takes it on himself to enforce Artemis's vow of chastity
Right.
by tricking her into shooting an arrow into her crush, Orion, by goading her in a display of her archery. Um, and that in turn, then Artemis is goaded into killing Apollo's girlfriend at the time.
Yeah.
So a little bit of a blow up there. On the other hand, he had a long-term friendship with Hermes or Mercury in the Roman version.
Hmm.
Even after Hermes stole his cattle, they was able to
That's
bury the
right.
hatchet there.
That's right.
So that was a positive. With his children, it's a little bit more of a mixed bag.
Mm.
He did kind of farmed out the raising of Asclepius, but after Asclepius's initial death at the Thunderbolt by his grandfather Zeus, that actually prompted one of the bigger blowups between Apollo and Zeus,
Mm.
where Apollo goes and kills a Cyclops, workman of Zeus, because of course he can't directly threaten Zeus, but he kills a Cyclops who makes the Thunderbolts,
Oh.
and he ends up getting his way on that one when Asclepius is made a god, and then some accounts are that Apollo then had to do another year of penance
Mm.
after that one as a shepherd, but he stuck to his principles, stuck up for his uh, son, but he also took out his anger on sort of an innocent bystander.
Innocent Cyclops. Yes.
Yeah, an innocent Cyclops. Yeah, a sentence you don't hear every day.
No.
So complex episode there. Then, if there is an issue with Apollo in Divine Comedy, it's the pride factor.
Mm.
Which is ironic since he is the big punisher of hubris,
Yes.
but he has his own issues with pride. So this might be a case where he sees it in others,
Oh.
doesn't like it in himself. So
Yeah.
that came to play in episode 4 on with Morpheus, as you may recall that the reason that dreams have prophecy was Zeus saw the arrogance of Apollo at having prophecy and the way he sort of lorded it over the other gods.
Mm.
So just to bring Apollo down a peg, Zeus allowed the dream daemons to have prophecy too.
Oh, that's
And
right.
and eventually Apollo has to go back to Zeus once he's sufficiently chastened, and because Zeus, of course, cannot go back entirely on this, he has to add false dreams, false prophecies to the dreams, so they're no longer reliable.
Right.
All right. And you mentioned Pan, who foolishly challenges Apollo to a music contest and predictably loses.
Right.
And the giving the donkey ears is a bit of a mocking punishment. Or, kind of really sticking it to him, disfiguring a fellow god with an ear transformation for engaging in a musical challenge. It's not exactly what we're looking for
No.
in this round. So those are kind of the negative sides that I had on him. And as you mentioned, with Prometheus, there's less to go on because being tied to a boulder for millennia really kind of cuts down on your social interactions.
That's a great point.
But there was that one primary relationship that dominates his god to god interactions, and that of course is with the big fella Zeus.
Mm-hmm.
In his episode, I believe you termed them as frenemies.
Yes. Yes.
Which does capture that relationship. So, again, they have this kind of on again, off again relationship. Prometheus and Zeus align in the war with the Titans, and then with the creation of men. Then they fall out over the sacrifices of fire, and then, in perhaps one of the lost plays of Aeschylus, there is the hint that perhaps they reconcile, when Prometheus is unbound, because he may have told Zeus which goddess not to have children with if he didn't want to get overthrown, and that would have been Thetis, who is the mother of Achilles, because the prophecy was that she would have a son much greater than her father, and therefore Zeus commands her she must marry a mortal and Achilles is much greater than his father, but he has a diminished father. So, and then in Prometheus Bound, we also see Prometheus interacting with a couple of other gods who kind of come to visit him there on the rock. Hephaestus is kind of sympathetic to him, feels like he's being wronged. The Titan god Oceanus shows up, and the two were shown as friends, and Prometheus actually has to talk Oceanus out of interceding with Zeus because he says that's just going to get you in trouble, my friend. So, I have to wait this out for a couple hundred years.
Right.
Before he's cooled down a little bit.
Yes.
And then, of course, there is the famous relationship with Epimetheus, where he is a bit overindulgent, but also very forgiving.
Right.
So, real complicated one. And I did note the intercession of Apollo and probably Artemis too, who intercede on Prometheus' behalf to get him freed.
Yes.
So, again, less evidence here, and we have the two mixed bags. But, when it comes down to it, that relationship with Zeus, that on again, off again, I think most of it we would probably blame on Zeus being
Yes.
the wrong party in that. However, I don't think Prometheus was totally innocent in that.
Certainly not. No, he was pulling the shenanigans all throughout and unprompted. So Zeus had to respond. Did he respond accordingly? Did the punishment fit the crime? Perhaps not.
Yeah. So I have joined you in going for Apollo in this one as well. So we have our first clear winner. It is 1 tie and 1 for Apollo.
Yeah.
We're going into our third deciding round.
Yes.
Where Prometheus can tie it up and send it off to the fates, and we'll see how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
So this is In God We Trustworthiness, which is a little bit of a mouthful.
Yeah, you did it well. That was good.
Yeah, and this is, we're going to call a god out of retirement, an ancient deity to help us save our troubled world. It's probably worth asking a little bit about the trustworthiness
Yes.
of that deity. Ideally, we're not looking for a Gozer the Gozerian situation here with the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. So which one of these two deities can we trust most? Who has the least downside risk for us? So Apollo, I think I've already hinted a couple times on what his downside risks are. Apollo was known as the god of sudden death. Which is not to be discounted. Any sudden death could be attributed to Apollo, especially for male youths. It could be deserved for some reason. It could be a mercy, or it could be just that your mother was a little bit mouthy.
Right.
So, then there are the prophecies, which, while technically always true, did have some ambiguity to them.
Very much so.
Occasionally indirect or just confusing. And so while having divine messages to spread throughout the world is a good get, when big part of the reason why I gave him the win in our first round, the risks of those being misunderstood is something we should be concerned about. And we have here, Matt, actual historical evidence from prophecies given by the oracle at Delphi that were recorded. So this is empirical data.
Yes. Facts.
Hard facts. So in 1630 BCE, for example.
Oh my. Okay.
Going way back. The king of the island of Thera went to Delphi, and he was told to found a colony in Libya. But one problem with this is that the king of Thera literally had no idea what Libya was. So he just throws up his hands, and they don't do anything. They don't know where that is. So then the Therans have a drought, and things aren't going too well for them. So, we should maybe go back to Delphi, get a little more help from the oracle. And this time it says, make a settlement at Cyrene. And again, the Thebans say, Google Maps will not be invented for 2,600 years. Could you draw us a map? But that's all the oracle gives them. So they go to their buddies on the island of Crete, which I believe is where you will be going soon.
Yes, I will.
And and the Cretans are a little more worldly. They're big sailors, so they tell them where Libya is, and in the general sense of where Cyrene would be. And so the Therians establish a colony, but it wasn't the exactly right spot apparently.
Oh,
So bad luck still haunted them. But then they get some local helps from some local Libyans. They said, no, this is the right spot. This is where you found the city. And so they do found their city there, and their bad luck stops. So the oracle was correct, but at times it can be kind of like, IKEA instructions with a couple panels are missing, which is just frustrating.
Very much so. You could have had Libya, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah. So, and then there's another famous case of misinterpretation. I think this is the most famous one. So the king of Lydia, which is kind of over in Asia Minor, what is now Turkey, he asked if he should join the mainland Greeks in their war with Persia. And his emissaries were told that if he did, a great empire would be destroyed. Now, so unfortunately, the emissaries of the king didn't bother to follow up and say, could you tell us which empire that would be?
No,
we have an empire. The Persians have an empire. This seems like 50-50. But they'd already left. The moment had passed. It was a little embarrassing. So they just took that message to the king. And unfortunately for them and their families, it was the Lydian Empire that was destroyed. So the misinterpretation is a little bit of a risk, I think. And then we have the anti-hubris stand, which we've mentioned a couple times with the music contests and the Niobe's kids, which you mentioned.
Yes.
Just being slaughtered over, some over-the-top braggadocio by their mother.
Right.
Again, a bit of a downside risk. And, and lastly, of course, while Apollo could stop a plague in the right situation, he was nearly just as happy to start one up, as we saw in the Iliad, and you've already mentioned that one.
Yeah.
So that's what I had around Apollo. On Prometheus side, usually has some good stuff. There are not too many stories of Prometheus intentionally causing harm to people, but he does, of course, occasionally miscalculate.
That's true.
So such as Pandora's Jar of Horrors, which was unleashed on mankind in retaliation for Prometheus giving us fire.
Right.
And there was a lot of bad stuff in that jar.
Yes.
Just a lot of bad stuff. But, that again, I think is more directly at Zeus's feet than Prometheus, but there was some miscalculation there. Then it's unclear whether the gods can bring their own entourage back with them.
That's we should have set that rule. That's true. It's
nobody's really done this before. So, does the idiot brother Epimetheus come back with him?
That's a red flag. That's a risk for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely a risk. Epimetheus is not a bad guy.
No,
he means well, but he's just not necessarily part of our ideal divine regime that we would like to establish.
Yeah. Almost like if you cast Alec Baldwin in a movie, then you also had to include, Billy and Steven in the same movie. It's a risk.
Yeah, definitely. We don't know what the writers are on this contract. But all that being said, the risk of another pandemic being started, some of the sudden death piece of it, I did go with Prometheus as having the least downside risk. And so my vote on this category is going to Prometheus.
Yes. Interesting. Yes. Well, I'll tread lightly over a little bit of the things that you've talked about. I think if there's one thing that's really predictable about Apollo, where he is incredibly, solid and consistent, it's winning. Yeah. He always won in archery, music contests, athletic competitions. Anytime he had to confront a monster in defense of his mother, almost a perfect record across the board.
Right.
But, then again, as we talked about, he often goes a little over the deep end, even in moments of victory. We flaying the loser of a friendly competition, sending, as you said, arrows full of plague to poison his enemies. In a strange way, and I can't decide if this is predictable or not, but there's a part of Apollo that also just hates to make a decision. I think the best example, of course, and you alluded to it earlier, is when he fell in love with all 9 of the muses.
Yep.
He was just unable to pick one. And so he remained forever unwed and essentially just dated all 9 of them his whole life. So essentially, treating life like in the same philosophy that you would approach a buffet. There's a little bit of everything, just yes to all.
Right.
There's a certain predictability to that, but there's also a certain unpredictability because you are choosing not to choose. So a little abstract there, but I think in a certain way that sort of balances the scales a little bit in either direction. On the Prometheus side, of course, he began with the ultimate act of rebellion, being the Titan fighting against the Titans in the Titanomachy. But from there, I think he, apart from the sort of trickster nature that he had with Zeus that we talked about, of course, stealing fire, rearranging the animal parts, he's pretty much a model of consistency, at least as far as what he can control. So he does everything for humans. The fact that, as you alluded to, over all those centuries of torturous punishment, he had the knowledge of that punishment, or that prophecy about Zeus that everybody wanted to hear, especially Zeus himself, and yet never revealed it. Or if we're to believe part of that telling, maybe revealed it to Zeus after he was finally freed. We're not clear on that, but I think there's a decent case to be made there. But the point is, during his imprisonment, he kept his mouth shut. And I think, to me, that's the ultimate act of trustworthiness. It's having that information, but still keeping your mouth closed, doing your time. And like the mobster who comes out of the can with never having squealed, he kind of walks out and is in everyone's good graces.
Yeah.
So when you combine all of these, I think, to his credit, Prometheus, with him, what you're getting. He's always going to be on our side. And in the context of the risk either way, even if there's risk about him being a little tricksterish, it's unlikely he'll aim that toward us. If anything, it will go toward protecting us, not creating risk for us as humankind. We know that Apollo, in contrast, definitely stands up for his own. But beyond that, his allegiances are very much more abstract. He kind of he allies with whoever makes sense at the time. He's this sort of solo figure who really looks out for himself first, apart from his family, and chooses a little bit of everything rather than take a principled stance in any one direction for too long. So, given that it's, again, a very, very close calculation, I think since he was able to do hundreds of years for us while keeping his mouth shut, I think Prometheus, in that gesture of trustworthiness, gets the nod on this category for me. So Prometheus is my choice, which I think gives us exactly the outcome we thought might be the case.
Yes. Yes. For those scoring at home, if you this week got your scorecards, that would show you we are 1-1 with a tie.
Oh,
and so that brings us to the fates. Fitting, I think. Fitting that the Moray sisters are going to be the ultimate deciders. They were deciders of so much in the ancient world, and that is going to be the case here. So I think we're going to have to take a little bit of a break.
All right.
As I set up the sheet, and we will come back.
Well, I'll tell you what, while you're doing that, I do want to just prepare the Golden Goat for its award, even if we don't know for another few minutes where it's being awarded. So I mentioned this last time, I've been raising and we've been very well behaved, this goat, since we started this back in January. In the week since we recorded our previous half of this episode, I have been in preparation for this episode, hand-coated him, the goat, with 14 karat gold to prepare him for the ultimate grand prize. Now, I feel like I have to say, for all you animal lovers out there, and I'm one of them, have been over the years, I'd like you to rest assured that I have taken precautions to keep our little friends safe. So now, Andrew, you can see over the camera, our audience cannot, but you can see that I've left some holes in the metallic covering so that our goat is still able to breathe inside there. So,
well, apparently, yeah.
Yeah. So I think as a thank you to all the sacrifice that our little friend has made, I think it's time to give him a chance to say a few words. So, what do you say, little buddy? Any words for our audience? Not your big moment has arrived. Oh, okay. I mean, that sounds good. It sounds a little echoey in there. But I guess you are kind of encased in gold, so I suppose it makes sense. But hey, it's good news. That means you're alive, and beyond that little responsive bleep just now. You've been keeping rather quiet throughout the festivities, which I assume is just to honor the sanctity of the moment. Andrew and I have done that with our tuxedos. You've done it, our little goat friend, with your rapt and quiet attention, which I appreciate. So he's ready to go, Andrew. You've been able to consult, as with anything involving ancient history, it all comes down to a pre-programmed randomizing spreadsheet.
Yes, that is true.
Do you have a verdict for us?
I do not. So,
well, then why don't we take a quick break, pins and needles, and we will come right back with an answer and who gets the golden goat just on the other side of this break. And we are back, coming out of the break for the final section, the verdict of the fates. The spreadsheet is about to speak, and we will observe it live as it happens. Yes. So, Andrew, you've got the screen shared for those of us at home, ready to flip the magic cell to see who wins the golden god and takes it all home.
Yes, I'm going to hit the invoke the fates button, and it's going to give us live here who is the winner. And here goes.
There you go.
Oh, Prometheus.
It is Prometheus indeed. The Titan, the god of foresight, brings it home in a tight battle to the end against Apollo.
Yes, the skin of his teeth.
Skin of his teeth. Wow.
He has made it. He's gone a long way from the mountain types in the Caucasus.
I should say so.
To first deity out of retirement.
Boy, I tell you what.
Our pantheon.
Yes, very exciting. I'm excited for him. I do have a few short remarks prepared for him. I wasn't aware who was going to win, so I kind of had some for both. But Prometheus, of course, as a lasting force in the culture, still loves his dear creation of mankind, which suggests to me he's still paying attention. So it's not as though he has a final resting place that when I go to Greece next week I'll be able to visit.
Right.
But I think we can be pretty confident that due to his love of humanity, he is paying attention to the proceedings here and will be made aware of this. So I'll be on Greek soil. I'll be able to make this announcement officially, and I'm sure he'll hear it and be present to that. Now, since this is the one being with centuries of experience and sitting around being tortured, I gotta believe he's a devout listener of this podcast. So if nothing else, he'll hear this episode when it drops on Friday. So our message to you, Prometheus, first of all, congratulations on your victory. Since you were instrumental in winning a 10-year war that reshaped the course of history, I imagine you have some sense of what a triumphant moment feels like. And this has to be right up there with that. So with that, Andrew and I would like to present you with the golden goat, who I will bring with me next week. In exchange, all we ask, Prometheus, is that you limber up, get off the bench, maybe catch up a little on technology because we've advanced a little bit since Fire. And it's your turn to do your best to save our world. You've won tough battles before, and I think we're asking you to do it one last time. So that is the finale, Andrew. I think we've learned a lot. It's been quite a journey.
Mm-hmm.
We finally have a winner of that golden goat to be delivered shortly back in Greece. So I suppose it's time to say our thank yous. As always, our thanks to Andy Snow for the theme music. Really enjoyed that this year. Thank you to all of you out there, every listener who's been along with us for this profound and in some cases bizarre journey.
Right.
And Andrew, thanks to you, my friend, for making this all possible. I make it a practice not to drink during these, but I do have a glass of cider here, which
nice
fresh cider from the local area. Kind of tying back to the golden apples.
Yes, very nice.
So I raise my glass of apple cider to you for your dogged work and artistry throughout the season. Thank you for that. I will raise that glass to you remotely. Very, very well done. And thanks to everybody. Andrew, anybody you'd like to acknowledge on the way out?
Well, I just want to let our listeners know, some of them may be asking, well, what can we do to help? Right.
Yes.
Especially if they're listening to this live, this may be similar to the Tinkerbell effect in the movies of Peter Pan. Just your belief.
That's right.
It brought Tinkerbell back from death. So shouting out your window or wherever you happen to be. I believe in Prometheus.
Yes.
Is a good start.
Great.
Also, if you feel like doing a sacrifice of something goat related, maybe that's helpful. A votive candle, I assume lighting a fire probably is a good way to get Prometheus's attention and make sure he is willing to come back. And of course, as always, listen, like, and review, spread the word. And and then on the other hand, if you're somebody listening to this in the future, hopefully you are enjoying the burst of technological growth we've brought about, and just the general saving of the world. So
that's true. So it takes on a whole other meaning when you're looking at it in the future, where the world has been saved, thanks in large part to Prometheus. So enjoying this program is just a good thank you to that. Sending your good graces back in time in gratitude to the great Prometheus, our winner of the season. Congratulations to him. Congratulations to all of us, frankly, because life's about to get a lot better once he is at his duty.
For a season well done.
Very good. All right. Well, let's leave it there, my friend. Well done. My thanks. Thanks to all of you. And we will see you next time as whatever unfolds after this season takes place. We got some surprises in mind for a little bit later on.
Yeah.
Which we'll reveal down the road. But until then, thanks for being a part of it. And good luck out there.
Bye-bye.
Bye.